Hi, Gail.
Hi, hi Sam, how are you?
Doing well. Good to have you on.
Thank you. Beautiful day today.
Gorgeous. Whereabouts are you, Gail?
Larchmont, Westchester County.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really pretty today.
Yeah, I know we're getting into that spring weather, and it's just been getting so warm here in Colorado. So it's about 60 degrees, 60-degree weather. So the snow is melting quickly at some of the resorts.
Oh, they're not too happy, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know, that's right. Everybody needs to get out there and take advantage of the spring skiing.
Mhm.
For sure.
Yeah, I definitely, down in Puerto Vallarta here, I am a skier. I mean, it's been a while since I've been skiing, and I just get so surprised when I see these posts of snow. It's almost like, I'm like, because I've been down here for what, 4 or 5 months now, and I just, it almost surprises me, like, what is that? And I've lived in Colorado like ever since I've been a year and a half, so I'm practically a native. But when we're in this nice warm mid-80s climate,
You're in Puerto Vallarta, you said?
Puerto Vallarta, yeah.
Oh, beautiful place. Lucky you.
Oh, yes, I feel spoiled. I very much am. Thank you. And but it's also given me we were just talking earlier, and I'll talk about this next week. It's just an education about different cultures and how gentrification, I probably need to pronounce that word correctly, but it just feels like everybody is trying to turn everything into the United States or into their culture, or, I'm going to move down here, but I want it to be like home.
Yeah.
And so I definitely have had quite the experience.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
We're gonna talk into detail about that next week too. Is just as far as how bringing your culture with you, and I think that might be something that we should talk about during today's episode, Gail. I mean, because of course, when we hire new people into the organization, they do have a sense or an expectation from where they came from previously, or their own personal values, right? So
absolutely, and that's why it's so important to have that culture fit.
Yeah.
Because some people will adapt, and it's a question of how much you want them to adapt, and some will not, and that can create a havoc in an organization.
Yes, and very much discontent. I would say if a leader is unable to communicate well with their employees about adapting to that cultural aspect, there is the smile on the face as we serve the coffee, but underneath there's anger, resentment, and potential, resentment for their employer.
Absolutely. I didn't do it this way. We didn't do it this way. Well, it's changing, and you've got to adapt to what the new environment is.
Right.
And,
absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm excited to hear your perspective about that, Gail.
Thank you.
Hi, Howard. It looks like you joined us from New York.
Yes. Live from New York.
Live from New York. It's New York Live. So Howard is a compensation expert, and he's on Sam's team.
Yes.
We were just introducing ourselves to Gail, Howard.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's another challenging topic now happening. Compensation, very much so. So how do you reward people? It's not just the base pay and all that stuff. So
it's changing at light speed.
Yes, with remote workers, do you pay them a lower salary? Do you pay somebody in another state? And all of those emotions and leading into equal pay rights. It'll be fun to see where we end up with that.
Right.
And that's what we talk about.
Yeah.
We're here.
Hey, hello.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Guys, I'm getting the signal from Sam. The screen has been shared, so I know
Okay,
now.
all right.
All right, welcome everyone to the People Strategy Forum. Great to have some of you joining us here already. If you're on the Zoom platform, or maybe you're coming to us from a different platform, definitely tune in. And if you have any questions for us from any of those other Zoom, other platforms outside of Zoom, I should say, leave them for us. We do answer all your questions. But if you've never been to a People Strategy Forum and you're wondering, I hopped on this thing, there's a lot of people talking, what's going on? Our goal here really is to engage and energize and elevate your employees and your company. So how do we do this? We get together with a very experienced expertise panel. We bring in a guest speaker every week. And today we will be talking about harnessing the true value of culture with Gail Thakarar. So I'll introduce her momentarily. But my name is Jules, and I will be on the sidelines in the chat. So if you have any questions while we're live, do drop them in there. We want to cater this conversation for you out there watching, listening, and we want to make sure that, you know, any comments, feedback, questions that you have do get acknowledged. So I don't do this alone. I have a nice team here, like you can see. Let's introduce you first to Shah. Now, Shah is coming to us from Puerto Vallarta. We're always very jealous. But she has over 20 years of experience as an HR professional, people and talent management expert. She has had her own business in healthcare advocacy, and now she is diving back into career coaching, which she had done before having her own business. So we're excited to have her.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I have like 4 different businesses going on, but I don't want to bore everyone right now.
A real entrepreneur, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Shows that can be done. You know, you just start with one and you keep building and expand.
Yeah, when you become an entrepreneur, you become one of many.
Exactly. And you do it very well. And Howard, as Shah had mentioned, he is a compensation expert, strategic HR consultant, working along the crew at Comp Team. He has 3 decades of experience implementing successful compensation plans into companies on a regional and international scale. So we always love his insight as well. And he's on mute. All good. And then we have Sam, lastly, our founder and CEO of Comp Team. He brings this forum together each and every week, finds the guest speakers for us. So we're really here because of him. He is a compensation expert, talent management expert, has a great track record of implementing new rewards and compensation programs into various organizations. Now, that brings us to our guest speaker. Like you can see here, we have Gail Thakarar, as I mentioned. She is a global HR and people management and transformation leader. She works with CEOs of mid-sized companies and startups to help cultivate a diverse workplace, because that is a very big topic right now. And she dives right in, works with alongside these companies. And she also has her MBA from Wharton School. She's fluent in several languages. I was reading in your bio there as well, Gail. Yeah. Very impressive. So we're just very excited to have her here. Welcome to the forum, Gail.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you inviting me.
So Gail, so tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today, maybe your journey in your career and so forth, and how you've come to help so many companies be successful.
Okay. So I'm originally from India. So excuse the accent, because I've been from India to Philadelphia to California, back to New York now. And I came here to do my studies at Wharton, and then got recruited into GE. Worked in GE, the division was aerospace defense. So it was a very maverick division of, you know, we sort of differentiated ourselves from the toasters and the dishwasher side of the business, which was really the money-making side. And worked there for a number of years and grew up through the ranks. And GE is a great company that develops you in every facet of human resources. So you have to, you know, you look at the practice of human resources in a very holistic way. I've worked with GlaxoSmithKline, working for, well, they changed from neurosciences to microbiology. And it was a huge dramatic change for them. Moved to California, because I loved it, the sunny part. So I'm jealous when you're in Puerto Vallarta. Was the head of human resources for a couple of companies. And for some reason, I've always been attracted to companies that are going through dramatic change. So I was head of Beverly Enterprises, which was a 110,000 employee healthcare company that did 1 or 2 acquisitions a month. So you talk of a conglomeration of cultures that we had to sort of weed through and come up with an identity of our own. And then I was with Countrywide Financial in its heyday, and we grew from about 3,000 employees to 50,000 employees in 4 or 5 years. And we went from one product of mortgage banking to a diversified financial services company. And so I was recruited by the Money Group, which is a mutual of New York, which brought me into New York. And it was going through an IPO. And that's, again, another massive culture change you go through. So and then subsequent to that, I liked working for startups and fast growth companies, leveraging my experience with the enterprise companies. And that's what I enjoy doing. I consult with them, global companies that are going through traumatic change, growth, whether it's mergers and acquisitions, whether it's a cultural transformation, or they want a realignment of their organization. So it's been a fun ride.
Yes, there's a lot of experience there. And I'd love to dive into the stories behind some of the M&A activity that you've been involved in. But first, as we start, when we, every company has a culture, whether they like it or not, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
But when you go into a startup and you tell them about, okay, you need to define your culture. What do you tell your candidates when they ask, what is the culture like here? I mean, what are the first steps that a startup needs to think about when they need to establish or articulate what their culture is?
Well, I think usually in a startup, the culture starts with the founder, the CEO. And you may have to modify it as you go through, because what we are looking for is what are his pain points as he's or she is developing the organization for a startup. Are they going to be sales-focused company? Are they going customer-oriented? Are they innovative company? So they're looking for people with innovation and creativity and who think outside the proverbial box. So I think it's discussing with the CEO and the founder or a couple of the key players that a startup may have as to what are they looking for? Where do they want to go from where they are? And it's a very small entity, but they have big ideas to where do they want to end up at? Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to have all the answers to it in a startup, because businesses change, new factors come in and impact the business. I'm talking to an energy company, and the whole Ukraine war has affected oil, and it's affected their business, even though they're in renewable energy. So these things do change. But it's really saying, okay, where am I today? And then where would I like to be? And what are the reasons I want to be there? And if that's not articulated clearly, then they're just going to be going through a circle. So that's where I would sort of help them with the dialogue. And you have used several means you can do that, one-on-ones and whatever, to get to that point.
Well, if I may, I'd like to make a personal commentary on that very topic. My company, one of my major companies, the biggest breadwinner company, my business partner and I were very much on the same page, and we decided to bring in a third partner. And it was interesting because I think my biggest red flag at the beginning was, and this was probably 2018, probably early 2019. My biggest red flag as a former HR executive was this individual's resistance to even have his own job description. It was the craziest thing, because I was like, well, I'm the people person, I'm the chief HR officer of the company, as well as the chief operations officer. My partner is the chief executive officer, and this individual was supposed to be like the chief marketing officer. And he immediately refused to have a job description. And that was like the very, very beginning. So even though I've owned this company since 2017, we really didn't hire up to 30 employees until 2019. But that very moment when this individual refused to have a job description, it created chaos that rippled through my organization at every single level, from marketing, finance, how we manage our employees. The clarity and understanding of roles and functions really impacted my culture. So I was fighting hard to have this positive culture, and this individual would literally scream at my employees and put the fear of God into my employees. So we eventually just took them out of the meetings. But it was interesting, lessons learned now. If we do bring on, he's no longer a partner of ours, but if we do bring on another partner, I think that clarity, Gail, is what you're talking about. It has to happen right at the very beginning.
Yeah,
and
you're absolutely right.
Yes,
you're
you
right.
have to have that at the beginning. Go ahead.
Because as you look at it, culture, you sort of say, why is culture so important? And you just answered one of the questions. You had the wrong person coming in, wrong values, wrong person. And it's important to know, because culture affects so many parts of the business. It's the performance of the business itself. And, there are lots of studies done by larger entities, consulting firms, where they know the companies that have a positive, healthy culture are 200, for example, Bain says it's 200% additional revenue values that they had returned to shareholders for the top quartile of healthy companies versus the lower quartile of companies. That's a tremendous effect on their company value and the investors. And, if you have a good, healthy culture, whichever you've defined it, it's adaptive change. And we know change is a constant right now. So you can adapt to it. And so there is sort of a, like in your situation where you had a toxic individual come in, could have such a negative impact on your growth of your company.
Yeah, I think it was really highlighted during the pandemic. Obviously, I was managing the fact that our employees were scared. They were fearful. They were worried that because my company is a face-to-face company. So I don't go into what my company is about, but we are public facing. So this individual would get on the phone and say, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Everybody needs to run out and get unemployment right now because we need to shut our company down right now. Well, we did not need to shut our company down right then. We just needed to be more agile and adjust and work more remotely and mobilization. And it was fascinating being an HR executive for over 25 years that since this individual and I were not aligned, we were bipolar opposites. It really challenged me because I realized, so it also helped me reflect that when I was sitting at the table, at the executive table, and I saw conflict of prior executives, it gave me a real eye-opening, like, oh, so this is what it feels like when the chief financial officer and the chief patient service excellence officer and every other chief under the sun came together and they weren't aligned, how much that permeated the culture. Because even though the employees didn't know what was going on behind the executive boardroom doors, everybody still talks, right? The executives talk to their people who talk to their people. And then you have fragmentation and siloing that impacts the entire organization, even if you have 160,000 employees.
Right.
So it's critical. It's just
It is.
amazing.
And culture sort of translates a very big impact on employee engagement. And that is such a critical component today, where you're trying to attract and retain the best people in a very complex environment. Not only is it a hybrid environment or a remote environment, but it's also the Gen Zs coming in. The generation gaps are there right now. A lot of people are leaving because they're finding it better to work as consultants and not come to work every day. Or they're getting want to move to Puerto Vallarta and consult from there, as opposed to working in the middle of a cold environment. So there are a lot of those reasons that are happening, and change is definitely a constant right now. So when you have a stable culture or a healthy culture, you can adapt to that change. You can adapt to the pandemic, and you see the good companies did adapt. They didn't have terrible reactions of massive layoffs or firings or whatever. They handled it in a productive way. And that's why culture is so intrinsic. It's really the definition I look of it, and the one I like, is given by Bain, actually. It's a shared system of purpose, values, beliefs, and behaviors. Mm. And those behaviors is what makes the culture. And if you, Sam, as you asked, if a CEO feels that he's not getting that, he is not achieving his sales goals or revenue goals or market share or going into new markets or expanding geographically or wanting to merge with somebody or acquire a business, that's when he or she has to look at that culture of the company and say, do I need to transform my culture? Do I need to go for a change right now? And that's a process in of itself that you have to go through.
So let's just start at the with a little bit of troubleshooting, though, because I remember there was a time where Howard and I were working in the same company in different divisions, and there was a different culture in each. Isn't that right, Howard? I mean, what was it like in the division you were at?
It was, very revenue driven, not as client focused as I believe it was in your division, Sam. So it was just, we're talking about financial services, very gung ho, eat what you kill kind of environment.
Yeah, mine was more creative. It was more interactive. And so it was completely different. Same company, but different culture. So if a CEO sees this happening in their organization where there seems to be fragmentation, what are the steps that need to take place to bring this together?
I think the first thing the CEO and the executive committee have to do is to be very transparent and very honest and identify what the cultures are. In your example, there's more than one. And it's not uncommon to see it in companies. The previous CEO left a legacy and his or her followers are following that legacy culture. And the new CEO wants his or her new culture. So it's to identify this is how we're operating. As you said, one is customer driven, the other is cost conscious. One is more creative, innovative. The other one is, hey, we know what we're doing. This is where we are. And bring that to the table. This is not something that you do. It's for the faint of heart. And it's definitely not something you do between 11 and 12 in the morning when you have a squeeze of time. This is something you sit down with. If you're doing an offsite meeting, fine. But where you're working from morning to night to understand this process. And it takes time. Culture transformation does take time. And then once you've identified where you are today, honestly, then you say, where do we as a company want to be? And now that may mean, Howard, your head of your business may not fit into where the definition of the new culture is moving. And either he gets a package or she gets a package or he turns around. But then you say, this is where we want to be as a company. We are losing, I've worked for a business where we were not, not winning contracts, and we were not, this was a construction business, and we had issues because we didn't have any backlog. Well, okay, we are not having backlog, and that's what the CEO is focused on. There were a whole bunch of other, companies under this. And the realization was we weren't doing backlog because we didn't have enough estimators to go out and bid on contracts. So when I looked at it, I said, we have one estimator can bid on 7 or 8, 4 contracts a year, but we win, our ratio of winning is 1 out of 8. Well, that by definition tells me mathematically you need at least 2 estimators for that little business. And so you start looking at things because the president's trying to save nickels and dimes by not hiring a person. So I think you have to start looking and say, okay, our focus is on revenue generation. We want to be X billion-dollar company in this year. That means we have to increase our revenue. We have to increase our customer focus. And that means we have to put an investment in. So you go through that process with your team and see where you want to be. Then you go through the transformation piece in it, which is you do it through focus groups. You can do it through one-on-ones. Get all the data you can get of where you are today as a company, what are the weak points, really come down to nuts and bolts of it. And then go through a process of how do you change to get to where you want to be. Now, it's important throughout this process, and even before you go through, is one, you have the right communications to your employees. So they don't suddenly feel that they're going to be fired and you start having employees leave. The communication is very, very important. You have to have training because you're going to start changing skills and competencies. So you need to make sure you have a training going through. Constant looking at what we have done, doing a check and balance, being agile. I like to use the agile method, so that if you are not getting the results you're looking for, you're willing to change direction a little bit. It's not a linear process. You go step back and say, wait, this is not working for us. And let's look at this option because we uncovered something else. So you go through those stages and start working the process over it. Celebrate your wins because you'll get wins. And change in a way is a little nervous. People do get nervous to assure them that, yes, we're moving the right direction. And one of the critical things when you're doing the transformation, which is a very important role for HR, is are you changing your processes? The way you recruit, the way you onboard people, the way you reward people, how are you changing those processes to meet the cultural needs that you're going towards, the culture that you're creating? If you're creating an innovative culture, for example, and somebody makes a mistake, and the CEO jumps up and down and screams, you've just lost your whole crowd. Because, you have to accept failure as you're doing an innovative culture. So those are the kinds of things where HR can play a very big role with the CEO and explaining, and managing the process.
Yeah, well, I would tell you one of the tactics that I used when I coordinated the agendas for the staff meetings is I would coordinate it so that initially, of course, the director would kick it off, but the CEO and the other dude that I talked about, and then my compliance officer and all of those individuals would go first, okay? And then I would go last. And one of the things that I strategically always talked about is change is constant. Every single day is going to have change. So our employees needed to understand that that was the nature of this industry. And if this is not comfortable for you, working for an organization that every day something is going to change, then perhaps go to something that's a little bit more regimented and that. Healthcare in general is going through just major upheaval and constant transformation. Regulatory compliance, it's just non-stop. So as an HR leader, I needed to orchestrate that communication process and assure that each of my employees were talked to individually and talked to their comfort level around change and agility. And then also assure that they felt supported through all the transformation at every moment. It is not a change management program, okay? And unfortunately, in some of my prior very corporate types of companies, we would use literally there's 7 different, 8 different, 15 different change models. Am I correct? Some of you could probably say the change models off the top of your head, but the change models is not what's going to help with the change challenge. A change needs to be inbred into our culture and our personality. Change, we all are going to be just like living organisms.
And that's a company, the culture of that company is going through change. It's flexible, whatever, because of regulatory reasons or because of the digitalization of the industry or whatever the reason is. But I think it's very critical when you're going through a cultural transformation that the executive team understands why we need the change. They define the reason for it and be very, very specific on it. Because, for example, when I was with a mortgage business, we decided to, because mortgage industry is very interest rate sensitive, we were hiring and laying off people as interest rates changed. Well, you can't sustain that. My concern as an HR leader there was we're getting a bad reputation. And we were talking of hiring 10,000 people in a given time, laying off and then hiring 15,000 the next time. And that's a big concern when you have a reputation issue. And so we decided, I talked to our CEO, we decided that we needed to diversify our businesses. And we went through a process for a year as to say, how do we diversify? What do we diversify? And then we got serious about it because the conversations were at executive meetings. We gave 10 minutes of our time to this topic. And when we got serious about it, we experimented with doing acquiring mortgage-related companies. And we could assimilate them very easily. And we were successful in that. And then we decided to go after a mutual fund company and a bank and insurance company. And we diversified our portfolio. And now that is a big challenge because now our competitors were not mortgage companies. They were the Citi and the JP Morgans of the world. Our employees were underwriters by profession. And now they had to cross-sell all these products at the branch level because we had about 800 branches. How do you take an underwriter who's generally a pretty introverted individual and have them cross-sell? So the challenges you get, you had to think through all of these processes. We're not going to lay off 20,000 employees at that time and hire them in different people. So training had to get involved and develop programs. Recruiting had to make sure that the people we brought in were sales driven. And I'm a big proponent of competency interviewing and competency recruiting and having job descriptions with competencies, because that tells you what are you looking for in the individual, what leadership or analytical ability or sales ability or whatever it is. And we went through that exercise and survived and continued to grow. So it's a process that took a couple of years to go through this. And, we grew to a phenomenal number of employees and all over the country. And so I think it's important that the executive committee define why they're going through that change. They're having issues with revenue. They're having issues with sales. They have employee engagement. They can't hire the people, or there's a retention issue. There could be, several of those, or they just going through a major merger. And now you've got to integrate 2 major cultures into one. And that third culture may be very different from the 2 that you're inheriting. So it's all of those factors have to be done at the senior level. Yes. And HR does have a key piece, as you know, in helping and supporting it. But I think companies would make a mistake by saying if HR is changing the culture or leading the culture change.
Right.
Because that will not succeed.
Well,
It's not an
or creating, like I said, a change program. I'll give you an example. You touched on some things in my past. I was accountable in partnership with the CFO, and in one day we had to lay off 80 employees in one day, right? Also, we had to lay off those employees in phases. The challenge is that the position was in medical billing, which is essentially where our employees had a contact to get paid, right?
Yeah.
The patients that were unable to pay their medical bills. But we also had a sister department, which was called the physician side of the billing, right? Which is a very different skill set, because they would have to contact working with the physicians in order to get reimbursed through the insurance companies. Very, very different skill sets, very, very different types of behaviors and competencies and talents. I'm happy to say we were able to retain about 80% of those employees impacted, thanks to some people on my team that help HR make that happen. But I think that career mobility is truly, I think it is a strategic process of really considering the fact that things are going to change in the future, and it's not like we have a crystal ball, right? But these kinds of impacts, I mean, you had a very different field, right? But what is going to change in this field that our employees need to have the career mobility to be able to learn and have the competencies and the capabilities and the learning and the training and the development, so that they can pivot perhaps to a very different type of position instead of just being laid off one day, right?
Yeah. And now that is a bit different from what I was talking about, cultural transformation, because that is, you're talking about career mobility and retention of people and the business needs of it. Sort of my point was more on a cultural transformation. A company itself, it's transforming to meet some of its most critical business needs. And those are, you know, it could be employee engagement, could be a big business need in itself. And that's a whole different sort of a aspect, because you're looking at, are we recruiting the right people? Are we developing them? Because right now development, both soft skills and technical skills are very critical. Are we rewarding them in the right way? Are we training them? You know, how are we engaging them? And it's not just the, let's have a Coke machine and a, you know, there was a time when tech companies were thinking Coke machines and snacks and what were good did terrible things on our waistlines. But now that is sort of, many companies say, okay, we'll do it, but it's not the motivator for engagement. And the Gen Zs and the Gen Xs, they're looking for career development. So that's a whole transformation if you've got the people side of it, looking at it. But if it's a company transformation from a business, then you have to look at what are the business factors that we want to change. And then they have to develop the metrics. If you're looking at things like revenue, for example, you want to increase your revenue by X%. Are you meeting monthly or quarterly to see where you are in that data point? Is the revenue going in the right direction? Do we need to pivot from there? So I think that's sort of an interesting point there.
Well, and I would agree with you. I think that some of the challenges us HR executives and professionals have is to have the business, as I say, acumen to be able to translate the financials, the money aspect, the business aspect, to the fact that a training and development process is so vital to the culture of achieving a high performing culture to achieve those business outcomes. Okay.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So to me, philosophically, it's not just a training program. It's not just a learning and management tool that you stick an employee in front of a computer for 32 training hours a year so that they can do their annual, compliance training or sexual harassment training or whatever it is. The training has to be specific to be in alignment to the business objectives and the business strategy.
Oh, absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
And employees want, and I would say, speaking of generations, we have a very, I'm an Xer. I'm Generation Xer, okay? Jules is, I think, a millennial, right? We have a very business savvy. My daughter is, I don't know, what is she now? She's 22, so she's a Y. Her brain, she knows technology, she knows inside and out of business, she understands everything when it comes to employee engagement, way better than even I do, because the younger generation is now becoming extremely savvy with the fact that they've been subjected to social media and Google and constantly seeing bad leadership at a very young age. Am I right? So I think we need to get ahead of the game and learn how to translate, again, back to how do you have a culture that embraces development and training for employees to make a difference.
And you're absolutely right in that as a company is going and transforming itself to whatever it wants to be, there has to be, HR has to be present at the whatever the meetings are, of course they are. But they have to not only look at the training components, they have to look at all of the areas of people management and how it affects the employees. So it's as I mentioned earlier, it starts with the recruiting. If you are changing your culture, are you bringing in the right people with that culture fit? Are you, onboarding people correctly? So it does affect it. And yes, the training is a key component. Training in change has to go through. It's the skills-based training is there, but it's how are they adapting to the change that is coming through? And do they understand that? Do they, are you communicating it correctly to the employees, what your expectations are? So those are the components that I think you go through in a process. You can use outside people, you can develop a transformation internally, you can do it with your own leadership, or you can get outside help, but it is a process that has to look at all of these facets very, very closely and very carefully as you're working through it to be successful.
So Gail, I'd be interested in knowing what are you seeing right now? I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on in the world, and companies are trying to find ways to better attract and retain their people. Are there certain cultural elements that people or companies are focusing on right now to be able to firm up their recruiting efforts and the retention?
I think companies are just going through right now, from what my experience been in, working on projects that I'm working on, it's looking at, we want to grow. Most of the companies are sort of, some of them, I shouldn't say most, but some of them are disrupting the industry because the outside influences are affecting them. So digitalization is big. The pandemic and its effect are big with the different ways of operating. And then they're looking at how do we now attract our people that we need. We've heard about it. In one way, it's a good thing because the market for employees is wider. You can work remotely from anywhere. And some of the smart companies, I think, are looking at that, especially in the mid-sized space. Larger companies have a little different philosophy. But the mid-sized and the early stage companies are looking at, hey, I can pool somebody from another region. And Zoom calls and Team and all those other vehicles of communication are there. On the other hand, when you are dealing with people outside, you haven't built that connectivity with the employees from remote work. So there is an issue of how much more do you want to communicate? Well, where do you meet? Do you have frequent meetings, physical, where you see people? I think the value of employee retention, employee hiring has become a very critical issue for executives right now. And some of them are looking at, oh, if I hire the right talent acquisition person, I can solve my problem. That's a mistake. They have to go back and, again, as I said, look at their fundamentals in their organization. What is it that is not, that's preventing them from hiring the right people or from retaining them? And they have to look at both sides, because some of them are focusing more on hiring. But if you're not retaining your people and doing things to keep them, you're going to, it'll be an open door, revolving door, and that doesn't help. Employees are getting savvy now because they can look at literature out there about a company that, they know people. You can go through LinkedIn and find somebody who works at the company and find them what it's like working there. So they can get a lot of information about the company. And therefore, it's important that you have that face of your company correctly out there so that employees want to come and work for you. So it is a critical issue right now. And I think it's a mistake if CEOs look at it as, this is my recruiting problem. Embedded in it, I find, as I talk to CEOs, it's really a culture issue. Mm-hmm. For example, you get applicants coming in, and I ask them very simple questions. How long does it take you to hire a person? And they say, oh, 6-7 weeks. Really? What happened? Well, if you talk to the recruiter, they'll say, we had a candidate, we sent it to the manager 4 weeks ago, and I haven't heard anything. Well, you've lost the candidate. It doesn't wait. So you have to look at your internal processes, which is a very tactical thing, easy to do. But that tells me the culture of the company. Are you valuing your employees? When a manager takes 4 weeks to respond, it's not the process I'm worried about. That you can fix. It's, does he or she value the employee? And an answer is no. If you think you can wait for 4 weeks with a resume in your desk because I'm so busy, that shows that there's a lack of value of an employee. So I think that's sort of, go to the root cause of a problem than looking at a symptom.
Right.
And that's what you have to look at.
Well, as an executive sitting at the table talking about recruiting and challenges about hiring people, and I think that I can look at many of my colleagues that may eventually see this video and see this recording or listen to this podcast. I think we all can relate that the CEO and the CFO think it's an HR problem. Okay. Truly believe that it's HR's problem, that we can't recruit, we can't hire, that the days to hire is taking 7 weeks. It really is HR's problem. I think one of the things that I had a struggle in that role is that it's all of our problems, right? Every single executive at that boardroom table, as well as every single 100 directors and 30 managers or whatever level, big, small, startup, whatever level size of company, all of us have LinkedIns. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. All of us have LinkedIns. So I would look at some of the CEOs and say, when's the last time you updated your LinkedIn? When's the last time you went to a networking event that wasn't an elite executive event with other eliteness? I don't mean to sound this way, but you truly went to an event for recruitment purposes to meet the potential talent that we might want to hire. It really is every leader's responsibility. It is not just one chief HR officer's job to recruit the 100 employees that we need.
Yeah.
It is all of us in the company need to be recruiters. I struggled with the fact that my leadership team had a hard time buying into that strategy. But the reality is that the employee is going to work for them, right? And the employee really doesn't care about the HR person that met them in the interview or the application that went into the black hole. Wouldn't it be better that the employee actually meets the person they're going to work for in person? And that leader, CEO, executive could help recruit that person. It's a different type of philosophy. And I think that needs to change in today's recruiting environment.
And that speaks of the company when that happens. With most companies, I think they do understand the value of interviewing the candidates, even if it's virtual interviews have done that. But it goes back to the culture again, because if this again, when a manager doesn't want to do that, then they're saying, again, they do not value the people they're bringing in. And if you value the employees, your employee base, you realize that if you have the right people in place, your company is going to grow, and you nurture the employees and you communicate with employees, and that starts from the time you see an applicant. How you treat an applicant is very, very important. That then your employees the applicants will apply to you for a job. You don't have to go hunting for people, because you will have plenty of resumes on your career page, and you could select from that and then call them in, those that meet your basic competencies that you're looking for. So I think you want to get to the company wants to get to the stage where they have a resume bank, because people are applying. And not to name it, but Google, they've got thousands of resumes lined up for them. They don't have to recruit. They've got the resumes out there because of their culture. And, so they're very proud of that fact. So I think this is where eventually companies need to get through, is develop the right culture, communicate that culture to whatever vehicle they use in their marketing, in their internal communications, and on their all these websites and everything else, so that both people, employees and customers, are attracted to that business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would also say every applicant out there knows that most of our applications take about 2 to 3 hours long to fill out, okay, online. And I think a lot of applicants realize, and from personal experience, I can tell you that's the truth. Also, I would tell you that many of us know, applicants wise, that it's going to go through the black hole of the process. It's going to go into a robot. My resume is going to look for keywords. It's going to go into a black hole. I've spent 3 hours on this resume. And if I truly am an exceptional, talented person that someone is seeking me as an applicant, why would I have to sit down and spend 3 hours filling out an application that's going to go?
I think those systems are changing, Charlotte. They're now much shorter. But also, if you're an applicant and you want to get into a company, you don't go through the career page. You can network with somebody, and that's how you get into it. So you push and then they say, oh, put the application on the system. So because the system generates all the necessary paperwork, but you're working through a networking process. So that's a whole different topic of recruiting. How do you recruit? How do you attract? But it's definitely, there's your company image will bring in people to you if you have the right image. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Gail. I mean, the fact that the more we as leaders build up that reputation, that place where people want to be, and we communicate that constantly, just like we have a marketing program for our products and services, we need to market our how we are as a company. What is our culture? The stronger we'll be. So I know.
I'm sorry, quick question. Many companies I'm seeing now are getting HR to work with marketing. Because it's the same sort of thing. Employee centric and customer centric are really same sort of two sides of the same coin, as I refer to it.
Yes, very smart. I mean,
Yeah.
the big piece of that, of course, is that whatever we communicate, we have to live. You know, it's like it can't be a false promise.
Yeah,
No.
well, you know, many of us are looking at Glassdoor.
Yeah. All right. So I know that we're getting towards the top of the hour here. So I do want to acknowledge our sponsors and so forth. And one thing that I heard you say, Gail, is that you really look at competencies when you're hiring people and when they're for the right job and so forth. Well, this is a particular an assessment that looks at that focuses on competencies. It's called the TMA method, and it's a global system that through these assessments you can give them out to your employees or your candidates and learn more about them. It's a positive psychology assessment, so there's no wrong answers or anything like that. It's a very powerful platform. So if anybody would like to learn more about that, feel free to reach out to me, or you can go to TMA Method US to learn more about the methodology. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have an invitation-only event that we're sponsoring here as the People Strategy Forum coming up in May. So if you're interested in applying to be part of this event, there's just limited space. But Andre Bloom, the co-founder of the TMA method, is coming out to talk about some of the cutting edge issues that people are facing with now in companies to better establish that culture of trust, to have more clear communication and to bring in that coveted talent and retain your top performers. So if you're interested, please reach out to me at sam@compteam.net for more information, and we'll be talking about this further as we go through the next few weeks. Also, I want to acknowledge our next week's speaker, which is our very own Shar Miller. She's going to be speaking about the talent impact of working from anywhere movement. As we all know, that there's a drive right now for employees. They want to have that freedom to work wherever they would like, whether it's in the office or Puerto Vallarta or in the mountains or in the sea or whatever they may be. Right, so that's the current trend. Now that does come with consequences and things that need to be prepared for. So we're going to talk about some of those issues next week. So I'm looking forward to that.
I am too. Boy, I was a different color back then. But yeah, I call it Mountain and Sea Career Strategy, which is also Mountain and Sea Healthy Employer Strategy. It's definitely, Gail, I think you would definitely agree. It's going through a modification. Like us HR leaders definitely are going through a tsunami of transformation ourselves just to keep up.
Yes.
We did have one question. If you have any tips on bringing two very different cultures together after a merge.
I've done quite a few mergers and acquisitions, and it's not something that you could answer in 2 minutes. But again, it's the process I described. Definitely in a merger and acquisition, not to promote myself, but you need an independent third party to help you, because if you don't, you will get one side pulling the other if it's a merger. So get an external consultant. And then you start saying, where are the cultures? And they're going to be very divergent cultures. Where do you want to go as a company? Why did you merge? You merged because there was a business reason. You wanted to expand into South America, or you wanted to buy an XYZ product line, consumer product line. So whatever that reason was, then you look at it, look at the culture, present day, and then where do you want to be? And then use somebody to help you go from point A to point Z. You see lots of mergers and acquisitions that are not successful. I don't want to name them, but they're very obvious they're not, because they didn't go through a good cultural integration. And so it's extremely important that you get a third party to help you with that.
Great answer.
Great. Well, so Gail, as we're coming to a closing here, I'd love to hear more about how you help organizations, how people can learn more about your services and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, you can go on LinkedIn and look at my background, and my contact information is on LinkedIn, but you can get me at Thakarar at optimum.net, or you can call me 914-860-4823. I'd be glad to talk to you, even if you just want some, thought process. We're very willing to share my experiences with anyone who's interested in moving ahead.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So yeah, it's been a great conversation. Jules, is there any final questions that we have
no, that was the last one, but I put in Gail's contact info in the chat for anyone who might want
Thank you.
as well, so that's there for everybody.
Great. And then for any, if you're listening on one of the other platforms, such as LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, feel free to leave a comment in those forum sections there, and we'll get back to you later after the session. So, well, Gail, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here. It was a great discussion on culture and how to leverage that for organizations. So I thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed it. Thank you, Shar, for your comments.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week in the People Strategy Forum.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Everyone, thanks, Gail.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Jules.